The Dallas Cowboys went 12-5 last season. They won the division, but they were defeated in the wildcard round by the San Francisco 49ers. And I feel like a lot of people are really sleeping on the Dallas Cowboys this season. And it's really rare to say that about Dallas because almost every single offseason, everybody seems to think that the Dallas Cowboys are Super Bowl contenders, and the Cowboy fan base is always super overly optimistic. But I feel like many people are overlooking the Cowboys simply for the fact that they have something that I call narrative bias. And narrative bias to me is that you ever got into an argument with one of your friends and they said, man, this team is going to be trash because it just is who they are. For example, the Los Angeles Chargers. So I did my LA Chargers record prediction and somebody said the Chargers are most likely going to disappoint JT because they're the Chargers. That makes no sense. People are telling me that the Dallas Cowboys are going to disappoint because they're the Dallas Cowboys. And the reason why this logic doesn't make any sense, because look at the Cincinnati Bengals last year. You could have easily said, man, JT, the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be trash because it's the Cincinnati Bengals. And they went all the way to the Super Bowl. You see, we have to stop judging teams by what they've done in the past and judge them based on what they have on paper at the moment and potentially what they're going to do this season, because every season is different. And even though you may not be a big believer in Mike McCarthy, he does have one of the best coaching staffs in the NFL. You got Dan Quinn, who was really good as a defensive coordinator last season for Dallas, turned around that defense tremendously. You also have Kellen Moore, who is one of the best offensive coordinators in the game. He is going to be a head coach sooner rather than later. Rather, he ends up being a head coach at the NFL level or the college level. He's one of the best offensive minds in the game. So you don't have to believe in Mike McCarthy, but you do have to take into account that he has a really good coaching staff. Now, this team did suffer some huge losses. You got rid of Amari Cooper. You also lost Randy Gregory. And on top of that, you lost right tackle La'el Collins, but many Cowboy fans have a lot of confidence in Terrence Steele. Okay, Tyron Smith is still one of the best offensive tackles in the game. I'm really high on rookie offensive guard Tyler Smith. And you got Zach Martin still at right guard. Now, your depth at wide receiver is questionable, okay? And James Washington is going to be out for 6 to 10 weeks due to an injury that he recently sustained. But you still have CeeDee Lamb. Jalen Tolbert, rookie out of South Alabama, was a big sleeper coming out of this past year's draft. You got TJ Vasher there. So I think that the wide receiver position isn't going to be as big as a concern as people may think. You also have Dalton Schultz at tight end. So the passing game should be pretty good. In my best case scenario for the Dallas Cowboys is going to be 13-4. I think a lot of people are overlooking the fact that Dallas still has one of the most talented rosters in the NFL, top to bottom. There's not really a position that you can go by position and say, oh yeah, JT, that's a huge concern. You can say wide receiver may be a little bit of a concern, but it's not like they don't have no talent at wide receiver at all. You still do have CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup when he comes back, and I do expect one of the other wide receivers on this roster, such as TJ Vasher, Jalen Tolbert, to end up stepping up. Okay, the offensive line still should be pretty good. It may not be as good as what it has been over the last couple of years, but I still think it should be a top 10 unit. You have Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard, one of the best 1-2 punches at the running back position in the NFL. Your defense, you got DeMarcus Lawrence, you got Neville Gallimore there. I think that the interior of your defensive line should be pretty good. Dorrance Armstrong is somebody who I think could end up having a really good season. You got Michael Parsons, who went crazy last year as a rookie, Leighton Vander Esch. And then on top of that, your secondary, I think, is incredibly underrated. Jerron Kearse, he has been really active on social media over this offseason, saying that he feels he's underrated and he felt he was a top 5 safety last season. And I agree with that. And for the people out there who don't know who Jerron Kearse is, I don't really like using this term a lot, but you're a casual. Jerron Curse was one of the best safeties in the NFL last season. And you probably don't know him because you don't really pay all that close attention. But everybody who is somebody who studies the game or is a former defensive back knows who Jerron Curse is. And then you got Trayvon Diggs. Regardless of how, you feel about him, I still think that he should be pretty solid this year. I'm really excited to see what Kelvin Joseph does, if he could end up starting. So overall, I think that this defense still should be pretty good. May not be as good as what they were last year when it comes to forcing turnovers, because turnovers aren't something that you can always depend on. Turnovers are also something that varies from year to year. But my best case for Dallas is 13-4. You still do have a really good coaching staff. I love what they have on both sides of the football from a talent standpoint. They may not have great depth at certain positions compared to what they have had in the past, but I definitely feel like they have guys who are more than capable of being able to get the job done. Now, my worst case scenario for the Dallas Cowboys this season is going to be 8-9. Okay, maybe this team does end up disappointing, but even then, I can't see them winning no less than 8 games because the roster's too talented. I don't think that Mike McCarthy is just this bad head coach that a lot of people make him out to be, because at the end of the day, he has been responsible for building up this coaching staff. He was responsible for retaining Kellen Moore, hiring Dan Quinn. Those are all really good moves. So, some issues that you could have is, okay, maybe you don't have great depth at wide receiver, so if one of your starters ends up getting hurt, God forbid CeeDee Lamb goes down, okay, then you're going to have some issues there. On your defense, when it comes to your pass rush, you did lose Randy Gregory, so who else is going to be able to step up and replace that role for him? But outside of that, Dallas still has a pretty solid roster. You may not have overwhelmingly great depth like you have had in years prior, but you do have solid play that you should receive from your starters. That's why my overall record prediction for the Dallas Cowboys is going to be 10-7. Dallas doesn't have an easy schedule, especially when you look at who they have to play to start the first quarter of the season against. You got to play Tampa Bay, then you got to play Cincinnati, you got to play the New York Giants on the road, then you have to play Washington, the Rams, Philadelphia on the road as well. You got to play Detroit. Those are going to be some really tough games for the Dallas Cowboys, especially that Detroit Lions game, because the Detroit Lions, they may not blow you away with what they have on paper, but this is going to be a team that ends up playing better than what you see on paper. Then you get to play Chicago before your bye week. Then you're going on the road to face Green Bay. We know how tough it is to win on the road in Green Bay in November. Then you got another road game right after that one against Minnesota. Minnesota is going to be a tough outing as well. You got to play the Giants again. Then you play Indianapolis. Then you get a little bit of a soft stretch in your schedule. You're playing Houston, Jacksonville. Then you play Philadelphia, Tennessee, and Washington to end the season, which is a really tough 3-game stretch because all 3 of those teams could end up being playoff teams this season. So I think for Dallas, I think they're going to have some highs. They're going to have some lows. The typical Dallas Cowboys season. But I definitely think that they should be able to win a playoff game this year. I'd be incredibly surprised if they not only miss the playoffs, but if they get into the playoffs, if they can't win a wildcard game, I would be incredibly disappointed. And I'm not even a Dallas Cowboys fan, but I definitely feel like a lot of people are overlooking Dallas. Dak Prescott had a really good year last season. I think that's going to continue. He just had a bad playoff showing. I'm really thinking that the Dallas Cowboys are being incredibly overlooked. And you rarely don't hear that coming from anybody that watches the Dallas Cowboys, because they're normally always viewed upon as one of the best teams in the league, being viewed as Super Bowl contenders. But I definitely feel like when you look at this roster, this is still a really complete roster top to bottom. They don't really have any significant holes that anybody should really be worried about. Maybe you can worry about Terrence Steele and how he's going to hold up, but a lot of Cowboy fans have been going to war for him, so I think that he should end up being pretty good. So let me know how you guys feel about the Dallas Cowboys down in the comment section down below, and leave your NFC East record predictions. I appreciate you guys for listening to this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. Make sure that you check out the podcast on all podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Google, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available, and I'll see you guys with another episode shortly.